Good morning, media stringers. Happy Sunday. It has been a whirlwind start to the day, and I am constantly attempting to feed my child, who is actually quite noisy. So you will hear from time to time some occasional sounds that will pop up from my screen, which are coming from the lovely little Evie down here who is joining us. And also joining us today is the amazing Casey Beros, who, disclosure, is a good friend of mine, but is also someone that I've looked up to for many years because she is just an incredible human being, an amazing creative, and a very authentic person. So when we had Casey on last year, you guys really loved the session because Casey was just very honest about, a whole range of things that she talked about, and we got great feedback from you guys. So we wanted to have her on again because Casey's just released an amazing book, which I've got with me right here.
Same.
And I am powering through it. Powering through this amazing book. It's called The Bad Girl's Guide to Good Crossed Out Better, which I love because as a bad girl myself, I feel like this is my Bible. Casey is one of Australia's leading lifestyle journalists and covers the areas of wellbeing, health, fitness, all the things that you could think of. She's written for Body and Soul magazine, a whole range of amazing outlets, and worked with incredible companies who at the top of her field, and she's an expert on a range of different things that are very important for us to read about. The thing I love about Casey's work when I read it as well is that it's totally infused with her personality, which makes for a lovely change from the kind of, projection of things that we often get when we're reading content in this space as well. Case is a journalist but has a range of other strings to her bow, such as producing and a whole range of things to do with content. I will let her give a much more in-depth blurb about herself, but we will also provide with this session all of the links to her website, to all of the platforms that are associated with her book, so that you can go and find out more about her as well. Welcome, Casey.
Thanks, Beck. Thanks for having me. That was a great little intro.
Well, we're very lucky, and you look beautiful, by the way. I feel like I've been dragged through the bush backwards, but you have dialed up the glamour stakes for the session this morning.
Well, I just was like, I've done a few Zooms this week, Zoom interviews where they were like, oh, and so we're going to record video, and I was like, oh, damn, I'm like covered in child vomit and chips, and like my background's a total mess. So yes, I made an effort for my stringers.
You're a legend. Thank you. I'm going to quickly start by throwing some questions at you.
Please.
So we'll do a bit of an interview, and then what we'll do following that is we'll get you to read from the book. And then what we'll also do is we'll run a promotion across Rural Room platforms so that people can try and pick themselves up a copy of the book.
Yes.
So, Kate, my first question is if you can just give us in your own words just a short bit about the background of who you are and what you do.
Yeah, sure. So I am a Perth girl originally. That's how Beck and I know each other. And I studied journalism at uni. And as soon as I had finished uni, I knew, well, in fact, before I'd finished uni, I knew that health and wellbeing was the only thing that I wanted to write about and talk about. So that's really kind of where I focused my efforts. And so I moved from Perth to Sydney as soon as I'd finished uni when I was about 22. And I started working under a guy by the name of Dr. Norman Swan. And so if you've been following lots of the coronavirus coverage in Australia, you may very well be familiar with him. He's really been kind of a bit of a guiding light throughout COVID, just because of his very evidence-based sort of no BS approach to health information. And so that's really where I kind of cut my teeth in the sort of evidence-based world of health journalism. And I feel so fortunate to have spent sort of 6 years under him because I learned every medium that I could have possibly wanted to work in, I got to have as a touch point, video, audio, which at that time was radio, but now has served me really well in the podcast world. And then also events, consulting, literally every medium that I could have possibly wanted. Certainly lots of like real evidence-based editorial work, everything that I could have possibly wanted to get experience in, I was able to get in that job. And I often say to people, I think one of the benefits in being part of a small business, and I got very lucky in terms of my timing. He decided to start his consulting business and production company, and I was his first employee. So the business was small enough that I knew where the staples were, and I was doing kind of high level executive stuff. And I think that doing that for a few years, or for 6 years I was with them, is just the most incredible training that you could possibly ask for. So I think I got really lucky from that perspective. But then after that, I went and ran health retreats for a little while. I have had a couple of TV shows. I did one on the ABC with him. I did one on Channel 10 a little bit later. And these days, obviously outside of the book coming out, I work as sort of a medical facilitator, which means that I kind of facilitate conversations largely between healthcare professionals, but sometimes also with patients or with consumers as well. So I kind of see myself as like a conduit between clinician and consumer. Even though I'm not a doctor, I think of myself as sort of a very health literate consumer, which allows me to ask, I suppose, Beck, you talk a lot about audience, and, really the audience for healthcare information is often either patients or the general public or other doctors in order to kind of upskill and educate them. So I think those skills have served me particularly well in being able to really carve out a bit of a niche in order to be able to do that job. Because if you're not medical watching this, then this may be news to you. But I suppose it kind of makes common sense. A lot of doctors kind of can't do work for pharma companies. They need to disclose that information, and it's just not kind of seen as like a good look in that world, I suppose. So as a clinician, I've been able to really step into that role of doing a lot of kind of pharmaceutical-based education events for doctors, which has been really wonderful, because even though I think pharma gets a really bad rap sometimes, to play devil's advocate, I've never seen any other group or body pour so much time, energy and dollars into educating either healthcare professionals so that they can better do their job, and even consumers. Like, they give the government a serious run for its money, and I think that there's real power in that. So health information is very much my jam, I suppose.
There's something that you mentioned there which I think is really interesting and relevant for the stringers, and I've noticed it in the way that you write. It's so a lot of our stringers, as you know, are writers or storytellers. Those, even photographers, because of the digital age, are still having to put copy with their photography, or like learn how to blog and things like that. So writing is definitely a skill that all of the students are looking at. And it's a really specific skill. I think a lot of people think, it's just pen to paper, and obviously stream of consciousness is great for journaling and things like that. But for professional writing, where you're actually trying to connect with an audience and you're actually trying to say something in a particular way, there is that necessary intention that you have to kind of consider at the outset. Reading your book, one of the things I love is how there's like this lovely fusion of your perspective, but then bringing in other people, and also bringing in research as well. So can you tell me like how you do that, what your process is with that? You're not just sort of like starting and then just like vaguely kind of word vomiting and then it becomes a thing. It's like, what is your process around the starting point and making, we'll talk about the book more broadly as we kind of go through, but this is kind of just a small nugget that I think could be quite like provide some wisdom for those emerging writers, and also reminding the established writers, because I think you do it really well.
So I think that there's so many ways that I can answer that, but I did this course a little while ago, and maybe people who are part of the Stringers may have also done it. It was this like 5-day thing that this Dean Graziosi guy with Tony Robbins and Jenna Kutcher and a few of those kind of bigwigs in, I suppose, that personal development space put on. It was just this free event. And Dean Graziosi, who, for those of you who don't know him, he's just like a whiz bang sales guy, essentially, from the States. And he said something that really stuck with me. And I hope that this gives you some value in the way that it did for me, which was be the person. And I think to me, in a professional setting, that means cultivate the work that you needed 5, 10, 15 years ago, because nothing can buy experience. So just because you're not an expert writer or an expert photographer or whatever it is, that whatever medium you're trying to work in, don't worry about that. You're still where you are, and where you are is further along than somebody else. And so I guess the whole premise for the book was it's 100% the book that I needed while I was growing up. It's the book that I still need today. Like, this is not for young girls. I dip back into the book all the time, and I designed it to be, I wrote it to be read cover to cover, but I also wrote it for people to be able to go like, oh, I'm going through a breakup with a friend at the moment. I'm going to double back to that lesson. Or I've got to go in and have a tough conversation with my boss next week. I'm going to double back to lesson 14, get good at conflict. You know, whatever it is, it really was designed to be a bit of a Bible, so that people, anybody who is not only going through anything tough, but like the good stuff too, you've kind of got it there as sort of your bestie, like the person that you would pick up the phone to when things go wrong or things go right, or something exciting's happened, or you lose something important to you. Like, I want this to feel like that in a book. That was my intent, because I think growing up is really lonely. And I use the term growing up loosely, like we're still growing up now. I don't think that ever stops. And I think that life is lonely, and we're terrible at talking about our mistakes, which means that we all feel like we're in this boat alone, where in actual fact, if you imagine like a lake with, you know, millions and millions of tiny little dinghies on it, and we're all in our own, but we're all on the same lake, like struggling with the same things. And that's such a shame that, you know, in this kind of very filtered, very curated, very like rah be your best self era, I think it's really easy to like sweep our mistakes and our challenges under the carpet and not acknowledge them. And one of the things that I know for a fact is that we will learn more from the things that we get wrong than we ever learn from the things that we get right. And so I really tried. I'm glad that you picked up on kind of the structure of the lessons, because that was sort of my challenge, because I don't have a profile. So I'm not, you know, a well-known person. I don't have a big social media following that lots and lots of people would buy my book because they're super invested in me online. And I certainly don't have any kind of platform. You know, I'm not a regular on Sunrise or on the Today Show or any of those things. So I'm kind of a nobody, right? And whilst that is slowly starting to change, certainly when we pitched the book, I was very much a nobody. And what I had to prove to myself, but also to my publisher, was, well, this isn't a memoir, because it's not just about my life. And if I write another self-help book, like, the world doesn't need another self-help book. One of the things that I know after interviewing people for the last 15 years is that we know more than we have ever known. Like, the amount of information at our fingertips via our phones and computers is like mind-boggling to people even a decade ago. And yet I don't think that we're any better off for it. If you have a look at all, and I'm talking about in my world here, right, which is health and well-being. If you look at statistics around obesity, eating disorders, loneliness, financial stress, chronic disease, mental illness, none of those things are on the improve. None of them. In some small instances, we're getting better at treating certain diseases and better at managing them. We're certainly living longer, but I don't actually know that we're that much better off for all of the information that we have. So I don't think that we can continue to keep putting out the same information over and over and over again in the same ways and expect a different result. And I suppose like one of the things I really wanted to talk to people about today is there's this Dr. Seuss quote that I love, and I always get it wrong because I'm so dyslexic sometimes, but it basically says, today you are you that is truer than true. There is no one alive who is youer than you. And I hold on to that all the time because I can't be Dr. Norman Swan or Beck Bignell or Dr. Priya Alexander or Miss so-and-so with 100,000 followers on social media. Like, I'm not them. I can only be myself. And in my life, what I have tried really hard to do is take my personal experience, blend it with expert opinion. So don't take it from me, take it from somebody who actually knows something about whatever it is that I'm talking about. So you'll almost always find an interview with an expert in everything that I do, because I have such great respect for the fact that they have spent, sometimes decades of their life learning. Why would I tell you? I'm not a mental illness expert or a psychologist or a diet. Like, that's not my job. My job is I think my job is to entertain you and engage you and bring you to where the wisdom is. And that's what the stealth help genre is. It's like entertaining, but there's some wisdom in there too. So it was a bit of a gamble. I didn't know whether or not I could blend my experience with expert opinion with the data and that actually work. And so I hope, and one of my girlfriends said it really beautifully to me when she first read, a dear friend of ours that we have in common and who's sort of my bestie, Jenna. I got her to read the manuscript because I was like, I just need somebody else to tell me whether this is okay. And she did. And she said something afterwards like, just when you think you're getting all self-helpy, then you make me like snort with laughter. And just when I think like this is just for entertainment, you deliver this like 1-2 sucker punch of wisdom that like smacks you in the face. And that was the intent. But I didn't know whether I could do that effectively. So it's nice to hear you say that sort of works, because that was the intent.
Well, I think you can see the clarity in it, which is what Jenna's saying is very that resonates, because I think that's what makes it like move along so well, is because you've deliberately structured it like that. And I think that's a really good tip for our writers as well, is that pre-planning. And I love that you actually did some contextual inquiries before you started to kind of give you a sense of where the gap was in terms of what you're writing. I think for our writers, this will be a really good session to kind of watch through and pick up on these things for your own writing, because there's a couple of gems there, figuring out what you want to say based on doing some surveying is a really good idea. That can be done, obviously, like you did with interviews, or looking at your social media and what people are connecting with and stuff, and making sort of an assessment based on that anecdotally. And then also that process that you then went through about like experimenting it, but experimenting with that, but having that structure in mind, and then also getting some insight from someone that you trust to see, had you hit the mark on that, and then needing to make any changes if you got feedback that would suggest otherwise, which I think is really good, to always be open to feedback as you're going through the process as well. And the actual process of writing a book, it's massive, and you're a mum with 2 kids and a full-time job, a very big full life. How did you actually manage it? And maybe a step back before you go through that, and I'm sure you'll naturally touch on this, but what was the process from the beginning of end? Like, if I'm a stringer in somewhere in remote Queensland who has a specific area of expertise that wants to write a book, where do they start? Like, obviously your experience is specific to you, but can you give us an overview of that process, please?
Yes. So one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot for the stringers is because I have an incredible agent who pitched this book for me. She has the relationship with the publisher, not me. And I have been thinking a lot about how you get around that, because I fully appreciate that is a game changer. Like, I can come up with a great idea. She can get me in the door. Obviously, then I have to sell it. They have to believe in me. They have to believe in the concept. But if you don't have that relationship, then how do you get around it? And I
Can
guess
I
what I
just
would,
ask before you
yeah.
go to the relationship? Did you come up with the idea, then pitch it to your agent, or was it the other way around? Was the agent like, where
I
did the
came up with the
first?
idea and then I pitched it to my
Yep.
agent. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And so for people watching, the process largely, and this is, so I call myself an unknown, like I'm an unknown writer, an unknown talent, e.g. I haven't published a book before. I have no runs on the board. I have no kind of track of success, I suppose, like proven track record. That said, I did have the incredible fortune of having that relationship with my agent, which meant that for non-fiction in Australia, you can get something acquired without having written the whole thing. Whereas with fiction, you have to have written the whole thing. So I would say it's very almost like unheard of for a fiction book to be picked up unless they need the whole manuscript so that they can see, like, where does this go? How do I feel? And then they would work with you to massage it. However, because non-fiction is a little bit different, and you can kind of come up with the concept, and most publishing houses will have like a pitch template that they'll give you and say, like, answer all of these questions largely focused around audience and about you and why this book and how is it different and blah blah, like how. And one of the things that I can tell you for sure that my publisher shared with me is, because they took a real gamble on me, as I said, and I hope that this hits home for some of the stringers. I have no big social media presence and no profile. And so that really, in a publisher's eyes, is a gamble, because how am I going to sell books if I don't have either of those things? And I suspect that may very well be the same for some of the stringers. So what they said to me, and I hope that this is valuable, is what they could see was a fully fledged idea. So I wasn't just selling the book, I was selling the concept. So I had already thought through, here are all of the connections that I can leverage in order to sell it. Here are all of the potential brands that I think we could partner with in order to, I had to get creative because I don't have 100,000 followers on social media to sell to, or, a big platform from which to sell, or a big profile for which people would naturally, I'm not Taria Pitt, like they're not just going to naturally pick up my book because they know who I am. In Australia, you have to sell 10,000 copies to be a bestseller. I suspect that I won't hit that. However, to sell sort of 3, 4, 5,000 would be considered successful enough in my publisher's eyes. If you consider, let's use Taria, she's a good example. She's got 1 million followers on Instagram and a huge profile. For her to sell 10,000 books is like probably quite easy for her to do. That's not a lot of books when it comes to like the size of her network, or a Mia Friedman or a whatever. They could quite easily sell 10,000 books, but for somebody like me, that's quite hard to do. And so I would really encourage people to not only think about the book that you're trying to write, but what is the product off the back of that? So, for example, I don't think I've got any in here, but I created notebooks and pens and bookmarks, and like, it wasn't just about what's the book. It's like, what are the keynotes that I'll deliver off the back of the book? And when I do a reading for you guys in a little bit, part of what I am going to share with you is this whole definition of defining success, because I think you need to get really crystal clear about what it is that you're doing. So I didn't write the book so that I could retire and sip pina coladas on the beach. I would love to, but I'm probably not going to sell that many copies. I wrote the book as a business card so that I can position myself as something other than Casey Beros, health journalist. She asks the questions and stays out of the story. This is me stepping as the backing singer up to the mic and saying, no, hold on a second. I, on my own, have something to say. And I want to speak in schools and travel around the country and find women that need to know that life is so much easier once you like get on your own side and have your own back. So the book is just one, it's like the catalyst for the mission, if that makes sense. And I
It makes
fully
perfect
appreciate
sense.
that might not be for everybody, but that's certainly what it was for me.
Well, I think it's really interesting that you raised that, because all of our sessions this year, funnily enough, have been linked to the idea of success and like getting there. And what's great is the session that we had a couple of sessions ago sort of talked about like finding the confidence to even start to consider what success looks like and how you're defining that for yourself. And what's nice about this is a very tangible kind of toolkit around getting that success. And I think your point about clarity on success, once you recognize that you're worth the success, is a really, really good point. And I love that your intention with this book hasn't been like that sort of overarching let's win Wimbledon idea. It's like let's get on the court, get the tennis racket, but let's actually advance to the quarterfinals. That notion of going from backup singer to at the front and like to actually earning your spot in the spotlight on the stage and then moving forward from that point is a really great and very confident vision that I think that is really great for the stringers as well. And in terms of also what you were saying, and it is true, like obviously not all stringers would have agents, some do, some don't, but the idea that you had to clarify, then pitch the idea, and then when you've pitched that idea, did you have to also provide, you talked about, and I know I've seen through what you are doing, a comprehensive release strategy. What was your approach to also saying how you're going to get this product to the market?
Well, it was, okay, I don't have those big ticket items of this big social media following or this big profile / platform. So I'm going to have to get creative with how we do this. And I think for me, I was like, okay, largely my strategy was around brands that might partner with me who are keen to kind of be tapped into that 20 to 35-year-old market, but perhaps haven't done that in sort of a literary sense. So I thought about brands, to give you some concrete examples. I thought about brands like Cotton On and brands like that want to empower young women to feel good about themselves. And so I thought through that in a whole range of different categories, like clothing and makeup and alcohol and like food and travel. And so I really tried, and I really thought about, okay, who do I know? Like, not only to promote the book, but also like, who do I know that has brands that have done quite well? Is that a fit for something like this? Like, obviously a book like this, if I know somebody who's got a friggin' lawn mowing business who's gone gangbusters, probably not a fit. But what I do have is a couple of girlfriends who have swimwear labels that might very well be a fit. So, and so I poured all of that into the book. And I mean, that's my bread and butter, sitting down with, huge piece of paper and really mapping out like, what could this idea look like? That's so fun for me. I'm much better at that than I am at the actual execution. Often, I reckon for every 10 ideas I have, 9 of them don't make it past that phase. And I'm so pumped about them when I'm sitting down and doing that. But then I get into the execution and it's just not sticking with me for some reason. And I rather than like, I used to kind of beat myself up about that. And now I just choose to let it go, because I really believe that good ideas find a home. Might not be the television show that you originally thought it was going to be, might be a web series, might be a series of Instagram lives, might be a series of talks at schools, might take on a completely different form to what you originally thought it might be. And often I'll be sitting in a meeting and somebody will say something and I'll go, oh my God, I actually had this idea a few years ago. It was 4X, but if we just tweaked it, I think that would actually really work here. And so you've brought something of real value to the table. So I try really hard not to, like, flogging a dead horse is not the right term, but I try really hard to just be respectful of ideas in time and space and them finding their home rather than flogging every idea that I've got. So I guess that's a really long-winded way of answering your question. But what I did do, so I recognized my limitations in terms of what I knew the publisher would be looking for, and I shoved my strengths down their throat. So instead of delivering a 10-page pitch document, I delivered a 30-page pitch document. I worked on it for like 10 days. I couldn't have poured more into it. I had every chapter title thought out. I had to show them, they had to feel like, oh, she's really got this. We're not going to have to work very hard with her because she really understands, she really gets what this concept is. I can see that she would know how to execute it, and I can see that she would know how to get out and promote it, even though she doesn't have a big social media following or a big platform or whatever. So to give you like a silly example, when it came time, and we'll probably talk about this, but I was really scared of the marketing process or the publicity process off the back of the book. And so I hired an amazing publicist and, really like galvanized the troops to support me in that, because I'm not naturally a very like showy sort of, look at me. I hate posting all the time. Like, I'm not very good at that stuff. So I kind of hired this amazing publicist to really push me and to help get me the coverage that I definitely wouldn't have been able to do on my own. And I said to my husband the other day, one of his old, really good friends is best friends with Matt Lucas, who's good friends with Rebel Wilson. And I said to him, like, babe, can you please message that guy? Here's the text. Send it to him. Get him to ask Rebel if I can get her. Like, I just turned into a hustler, total hustler. Now, that guy never responded. That's fine. There was lots of people like that didn't respond. But I thought, if your cousin's mum's brother's sister's best friend's dog works at the West Australian or the Daily Telegraph, like, leverage that connection. Pick up the phone, send them an email, make it really easy for them. Say, hey, this is who I am. This is how we know each other. I've got this great thing. I think it's perfect for your segment X. Here's the press release. Here's the, the soft copy. Here's the pictures so that you can see that I kind of know what I'm doing in the media space, whatever, but like, leverage whatever you've got and then make their job really, really easy so that they will pick it up. And I was able to communicate in the pitch that I knew how to do that, or at least conceptualize that, if not do it.
That's amazing, because I think that's extremely relatable for the stringers, because I think what is very valuable about this talk, it's about going, let's take it to the next level, and what are the things that you can do to do that, because we live in a time now where that is possible. And your ability to be very proactive with that is very relatable to stringers across every art form, whether or not it's getting to the next level with your photography, what that looks like in that field, writing, and like you said, film and TV, and all of the areas of content. I think that's very applicable advice. What I liked about also what you said, and this is a common problem that creatives have, and I want to understand how you managed to control this when you were actually writing the book. But is that starting point, when you've got that brain that's inclined to always ideate, how did you actually move from figuring out this is the right idea, and then, as we said, you've obviously troubleshooted with the audience, or validated that there is a gap for it. How did you go actually then applying the discipline so that you could stay focused? And because getting to this point, that's the thing. And I don't know how I get it. You meet so many people who always have amazing ideas, and it's the same in film and TV and photography and stuff. Ideas come pretty cheap, but actually being able to stare at a copy of your book, again, I have no idea how to hold this properly because I've got a baby in one arm. But this is huge, because I reckon 1 in 2 people have an amazing idea that never sees the light of day. So what was what's your advice about how you managed to do that, to get to this point?
Yeah. So,
and also just on the back of that, because I know that you'll be able to fold it in, is not just the trajectory that you took, but also the writing process, like how you were able to actually focus yourself so that you could contain the story in a meaningful way.
Yeah. So I will answer that. But before I do, just because my brain is like a sieve at the moment, I just realized that there was something really important about the acquisition process that I really wanted to share with you guys. which was one of the things that I did well in that pitch. Was I mentioned that I didn't have a proven track record. What I was able to show them, and I think last time I was on, we talked a little bit about building blocks of your career. So how each thing that you do kind of builds on from the other, and not only cultivates skills and experience, but also gives you this really nice sandpit to play in, whereby you can make all of your mistakes while not too many people are watching. And that's what I've been doing for the last sort of 15 or so years. So the one thing that I did particularly well for them was that I was able to show them where I was able to find success. So for me, that's this article went ballistic on Body and Soul. This article went gangbusters for Mamma Mia. This article went bananas on my social channels, you know, and give them a reference for that. E.g., you know, let's say you have 100 people following you on social media. Are you still there? You froze. Yeah, what I was able to show them was that I had these really tangible examples, even if they were only in my little world or in my small following, where I had been able to see some success. And what I was able to show them is people are interested in this. So to give you an example outside of my field of expertise, let's say that you are a photographer who's trying to get into a gallery somewhere, and you've had, let's say that you're trying to get into a bigger gallery, and you've had a smaller gallery opening that went nuts. You sold everything. People were kind of reaching out to you afterwards with incredible feedback and asking for more pieces of your work. I would package all of that together and show the next gallery that people are really interested in what it is that you're doing. Like, don't worry about where that information is coming from, but just show them. Like, I think people are inherently lazy. And so if we can give them really tangible examples of saying, hey, people are interested in this, I think that that's super, super powerful. In terms of, to answer your question about writing process and discipline, my God, it was so hard. We were in lockdown in Sydney. I had a newborn and a toddler, so that was really tricky. Some days I didn't write anything. Some days I thought the book was the worst idea I've ever had. Some days I smashed it out and I was like, this is awesome. I love this project. So honestly, it was like a real roller coaster, and I just held on for the ride. I'm an overwriter, so I write way more than what I need and then scrape it back, because I write lots of like bull dust that probably isn't that useful to anybody. So yeah, I was pretty good at opening my laptop most days and writing just something, even if it wasn't something that was going to end up in the book. But before I got there, and certainly this was kind of in pitch phase, I really sat down and mapped out, okay, you know, this book is really related to my experience. And so and I ended up with 16 life lessons that I wish that I had learned sooner. That's really where I started, is if this is to be the book that I needed when I was growing up, what lessons would I teach my younger self? And so I sat down and I kind of mapped out broad areas like sex and friendship and success and body image, and really kind of mapped out what those things could look like, and then took that a level deeper. Like, okay, if I'm talking about body image, what is it exactly that I would be talking about? What stories can I bring to the table that I think will work there? What research do I know of? Like, what is it that I want to say? And so I really started at a very macro level and then sort of zoomed in slowly, and layer by layer really tried to dig a little bit deeper so that I could have a really good sense of where I was going. And it was probably easier to not get lost that way. That said, there were definitely days where I would sit down and be like, oh my God, no, I cannot write about sex today, or I cannot write about grief today, or like today is just not the day. And I think in an ideal world, we would probably with something like that, I would sit down and have written it really chronologically in terms of the book and the chapters. But of course, it just doesn't work out like that. You know, as I said, some days I didn't want to write about that thing that I had pegged for that day. So it was a real jigsaw puzzle. I had to, you know, jump in and write the bits that I felt like writing at the time, and then slowly it sort of started coming together. And for anybody who's watching who is a writer, and in fact for lots of creatives, my brother is an artist and he uses it too. There's an incredible program called Scrivener or Scrivener, however you'd like to say it. I think it's like $70 or $60 or something. Forgive me if I'm telling you something that you already know, but it's so valuable because particularly for a book, if you can imagine, I mean, I wrote 130,000 words for mine. Your Word document is like, just becomes completely like a minefield or a mess, and you can't even remember where that bit was that you wanted to kind of pull up and around. And so what that program allows you to do is almost write chapter by chapter or section by section, and then you've kind of got a drag and drop menu on the left hand side that allows you to move things around and click on a section and go straight to that section, and you can pin different things and you can keep all of your references in there. So it's Scrivener, Scrivener. I don't know how you say it, but I found that really, really, really valuable during my time.
Now, in terms of, this is sort of a bit of a more personal question, but how has it made you feel actually going through the experience of having the completed book and taking it out into the world? And did you have that moment of like sheer vulnerability and like talk me through that?
Yes, of course I did. I was pretty careful not to include anything that I felt like I couldn't defend. So the publisher and I had some pretty robust conversations around, and I said to my editor, when you've done like your first read, can I ask you to do another read with sort of your privilege and like, well, I don't know what the right term is, but like, I call it like the haterade lens. Like if you drink haterade for breakfast, like what will people throw at me for publishing this book? And so almost everything that she pushed back on, I was able to defend. And if I couldn't, then that was a pretty good reason to pull it out. So I had to feel really comfortable with, and I remember my mum said to me a few things about it. And she was like, but like, why do you want to include that? And I was like, well, here's why. Like there had to be a why. I'm not just sharing stories for shits and giggles. There had to be there's a reason for every story, even if I embarrass myself or I feel a bit ashamed about that behavior, or, you know, it's something that I kind of wish that people didn't know about me. If it serves the purpose, then it's worth including as long as I can defend it. And so I would say, you know, if mum or the publisher would say like, oh, I think people might get a bit funny about that, I would say like, okay, cool, come at me with what you think that they'll say. And if I can maintain you know, a relatively stable disposition and enter into that conversation with you and defend it in a way that is kind of cool, calm and collected and doesn't ruffle my feathers or yours, then it's staying in. But if I got hot under the collar, that was a pretty good reason to pull it out. And so, look, yes, I have all of those vulnerabilities. To give you an example, I had the book launch on Wednesday. And, you know, the social pages came, which was amazing because I managed to get a kind of couple of names there, which was great. Again, leveraging every connection that I have to do so. None of them are friends of mine. And, well, they are now, and they're wonderful people, I should say that. But yeah, they weren't kind of personal connections of mine. And, you know, a journalist came from the Daily Telegraph and wrote a stupid story the next day where he took like one lesson, asked me a question off the record, and then printed my response as a quote. And look, lesson learned, not everybody holds the same integrities as I do as a journalist. I pride myself on, like, if you tell me off the record, that is like my religion. You know, I would never ever do something wrong by a source. But it's the social pages of the Daily Telegraph. Like, we can't all uphold those kind of standards. That's their job. I get it. It was just a shame because what they printed kind of took the smut from the story and didn't bring with it the message. And that's the whole point of the book. It's not like I'm an ex-publicist of celebrities who's like publishing an expose on famous people, or, like, that's not the intent. And it was a real missed opportunity to really help women. But I have to remind myself that that's not his MO. That's my MO. It's not his. And so that was a shame, but it was a good lesson. And I cried 3 times before 9 a.m. that day. I was a fucking mess, pardon my French. And it really took me down a peg after an incredible, incredible launch day. And so that was a tough knock, but it was also probably a really vital one. And for anybody who's put anything out into the world, my God, there is nothing more vulnerable than sharing something, particularly something creative, regardless of whether it's a post on your social media account, a web series, photography, what do they call those? Yeah. Yes, whatever it is, or a book or an article or like whatever, but like that is, and that's why, like, my hat is off to all of you. That takes serious guts, man, to put something like that out there. And so I'm just telling myself the same thing. Like, come on, Casey, you've got this, you've got guts. Like, I'm so proud of you. Like, I'm doing lots of that really positive self-talk because I don't know how else to do it. And that's part of the point of the book, is like, you've got to learn to be your biggest cheerleader and your own BFF, because it's really important to have incredible people in your life, but you've got to start being incredible for yourself.
I think that's really great, Case, because it's not just the anxiety of the work that can be debilitating and allow you not to complete a thing, but it's also like the potential success of it. And also, when something is successful, obviously your profile does grow, and then you open yourself up to a greater audience, which means more criticism. And I love your response to that. And that's actually a nice little path to have journeyed down, because I think that's a very, like, your response to that is a really uplifting and leading by example, and what's in the content of the book, response to it. Because particularly in the space that a lot of the stringers work in, where there's a lot of misinformation around like regional living and practices and things like that, and so everyone's always already a little bit on the back foot, because there's less of media support and exposure coming from people within their communities. And so taking on that audience can be quite daunting. But I think you gave some really good tips there about your sense of conviction and learning from it, accepting that it's par the course when you're going large with these things, and then how you kind of learn from it. And I guess the moral of the story is how you process it so that you can actually keep going, because this is a very tangible experience that you're having, and I think that it's a really great. In terms of,
hey, Beck, I'm really sorry. I'm mindful of the time, and I reckon my kids are going to bust in on me any second. Do you mind if I'm still very happy to do a reading, but do you mind if
love that. Yeah, let's get to that, definitely. I think that's a perfect one. No, that's fine. What I might do is I might just do a clean conclusion, just so that we can edit together, because I'll do a few chops just so it's a bit more smooth and take out some of the wording. Case, all your lessons today have been totally tangible, and that's because you've written a book and it's out in the world and you're amazing. We'd love to hear a little bit of the book, if you'd be happy to read us a few sections.
I would love to. So this is from lesson 13, Someone Has to Win, so it may as well be you. Okay. Defining success. The term success tends to conjure images of material wealth, fame, or accolades, things we're conditioned to believe lead to a better life. She's very successful would have us believe that she has it all together. She must have to have achieved her goals, right? Maybe, maybe not. More likely, what she has is a plan and some gumption. But before we can get to a plan, we need to know what success means to you. Is it being a CEO, owning your own business and flying at the front of the plane? Or is it owning your own home and being a great stay-at-home parent? Or maybe it's a 9 to 5 you don't hate and weekends with your family. Remember, when you get to the end of your life, you're not going to be focused on how many deals you sealed. So while professional success is awesome, let's keep it in the perspective of the life you're building, not just the hashtag life goals you want to hit. Take the example of writing this book. I could define success by the following: achieving the goal of writing it and getting it published, writing it, getting it published and selling 1,000 copies, writing it, getting it published and selling 10,000 copies, putting me on the bestsellers list in Australia, or all of the above, plus making the New York Times bestsellers list. Which of those qualifies as success for me might be completely different to what it is for someone else. And it might mean different things to me at different times in my life. Right now, it's just a privilege to be published. But if this book is a success, I might use a different yardstick to measure my next one. So my question to you is, what do you define as success? Not your parents, your friends, your community, or your social media feed, but you. Write it down and stick it somewhere you can see it. Remember, this is not about your goals, it's about your definition of success. If I had done that, it might not have taken me so long to cultivate the inclination to really strive. Even though my body and brain were slowly moving me toward my goals, though I don't think I ever called them that, it would be years before I would foster the work ethic to get up early, work late, and every weekend and holiday pretty much ever. Deep down, I think most of us are inherently lazy, and bad girls are no exception, which is a bit of a spanner in the works if you subscribe to the notion that success is 10% talent and 90% hard work. How to get around it. We assume that when we find our thing, or when we're in the right job or working on the right project, dedication to it will flow thick and fast, that we won't struggle to commit to it in the way that we might have in the past. But this is simply not true. In her TED Talk titled How to Stop Screwing Yourself Over, US relationship expert and media wizard Mel Robbins says, in any area of your life that you want to change, there's one fact that you need to know. You are never going to feel like it, ever. It's very simple to get what you want, but it's not easy. You have to force yourself, and I mean force. This couldn't be more true. Most of us would much rather sit on the couch punching through episodes of our favourite series than working up that business plan we've been talking about for years. Acknowledging that it's going to take some real grunt, and that grunt might feel icky, will help when it comes time to ignite it. Successful people all have one thing in common. No matter what field they're in, they work really, really hard. They don't hit the snooze button, they get up and work out. They don't put off making that difficult call, they pick up the phone. They miss dinners with friends and holidays with family and prioritize the work over the fun stuff, not every time, but a lot of it. This truth is uncomfortable, but it's one you'll want to make friends with if being successful at anything is on your life list. There will be moments, lots of them, when you'll want to kick and scream and give up, but you can't climb the mountain without doing the work. It will be slow and painful and hard, but if it's what you want, it will be worth it. It's worth noting, though, that striving isn't for everyone. Cruising is just as viable an option. After all, it's what most people do. Someone who chose not to is Michael Jordan, widely known as the best basketballer of all time. If you think he's a curious case study in a book for bad girls, stay with me. Jordan played 15 seasons in the NBA and won 6 championships with his team, the Chicago Bulls. In 1993, at the height of his career, he retired and set his sights on a new challenge, minor league baseball. The guy is a stupidly gifted athlete, so jumping from one sport to another might not seem like a stretch, but he essentially became a rookie again. The world was watching, and he was the butt of many a joke as people compared his incomparable basketball prowess to his mediocre results in baseball while learning the ropes. But he just did what he does best, applied his legendary work ethic, and he ended up playing 127 games. I know nothing about baseball, but apparently that's no mean feat. In Netflix documentary The Last Dance, Jordan's coach describes his work ethic, the best he had ever seen. He would hit early in the day, he'd hit off the breaking ball machine, he would come in after regular batting practice, hit some more before the game, and then would hit again after the game. You could see it just building, and he kept getting better and better and better. By all accounts, Jordan was no picnic, but you don't need to be an athletic freak to borrow from his attitude to work and apply his dedication to success. Luke Longley was Jordan's teammate and is one of Australia's most famous basketball players to date. He knows what it takes to get really good at something. It takes a certain type of person to immerse yourself in something, and the fundamental ingredient for that is a deep curiosity in something and in yourself, he tells me. I didn't set out to be the world's best basketballer, but I got more and more curious, and that drove my daily habits and my practice. To expect that lots of people might find that in their lives is unrealistic, but I think if you have, you've been given an incredible gift. Now, I'm going to leave that section there because I think that for the Stringers, you're obviously a part of this network and you're obviously doing what you're doing because you're incredibly curious about it. And so I think that you have been given that gift. And I hope that my message to you would be, please continue to leverage it and to go after what it is that you want, regardless of your location. And Beck, hats off to you for putting together such an incredible group of people and such an incredible network of people who, you know, have been able to come together and support each other, but also to like make your dreams come true, because that is so bloody powerful. And I just think that you're all amazing. And I would love, if you don't mind, I just want to quickly dip into my conclusion, because I think it really nicely wraps up my whole point. And I hope that it hits home for you. Okay. One day I will get to the end of my life and you will get to the end of yours. You don't need me to tell you that when that day comes, you're going to give precisely 0 fucks about how many followers you have on the gram, how many pairs of shoes you own, or how many dollars you have in the bank. You're not going to be pining for that douche lord who kicked you to the curb, or still beating yourself up for calling your mum a bitch. I did that. I'm sorry, mum. You're going to be focused on the moments you felt the sun on your skin after an ocean dip, when you held your baby in your arms for the first time, and when you laughed until you cried and peed your pants a little. All you will see is how and who you loved. The opportunity is to know what it is that is going to be important to you on that day and go after it now. I spent a long time prioritizing calls from my boss over the calls of my babies and nights at my laptop over nights under the stars. I wanted more out of life, terrified of the mundanity of a normal existence. I wanted fame, fortune, and free shit because for some reason I needed to prove I was special. But for someone who grew up terrified of being ordinary, I have come to a place of immense gratitude for the incredible gift of a sound mind, a healthy body, and a few people who love me deeply. Because while we tend to take those things for granted, that is so far from ordinary. It is an extraordinary life. And I would love to leave it there.
That actually made me tear up. That's really beautiful, Case. Thank you so much for coming on the show to up the show. It's not even a show.
It's our show.
Thank you so much for giving up your time today. That was just such a powerful way to end, and just really great for our Sunday. We'll do an amazing competition to give away a copy of your brilliant book.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.